Thank you so much for all coming out tonight. And Doug and I wanted to also extend our warm thanks to you, Liza, and to Carrie from Yankee Bookshop. And what a beautiful space. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for hosting us tonight and for our videographer as well. What we want to do is just very briefly introduce ourselves a little bit more and the mission of the book, and then Doug will take us through one of the readings that's particularly impactful. So, as you've heard, we really are a very interesting duo, and there's a third author, Becky Robinson, who isn't with us tonight because she lives in Michigan, and she's a book producer and promoter, and has just been really pivotal to this mission as well. But what I like to say is that Deb and I we have the same interests in that we really want to help our country. We're passionate about that. We want to help people with their relationships, particularly now with the holidays coming up, mending fractured relationships. But we also have a lot of differences. For example, GOP legislator, former legislator. I'm more left-leaning. I am Jewish, you're Christian. And of course, there's that big rivalry. You live on the other side of the Connecticut River, but in New Hampshire, well, I live in Vermont, so go Vermont, right? But we have a lot in common, as I mentioned. And we both agree that this is critically important work. And I just have to say, Doug started the effort in 2024. It was one of your New Year's resolutions, so I'll tell you more about that. And then asked me to come on board in the summer of 2024. And it has just been an amazing adventure. And I'm so glad that I joined you, Doug, and that you had the confidence in me to include me. So maybe just say a few words about yourself, and then we can go into the reading.
Well, thank you, and it's great to be in this special space. And I have actually been here before. I had a friend, Laura Waterman, get a talk here, and I know this is a really, I could visualize this space even if I'm from that other state. But we've been involved with this national group, Braver Angels. It's trying to get respectful conversations across politics. And when we were in 2023, there was a convention down at Gettysburg, and we were asked to write down on a note card, why are we here? And I wrote down that I'm here because I worry that my grandchildren are not going to enjoy the benefits of this country like I've had. And that was in 2023, and I guess it was about 6 months later, I said, well, I've been doing work with Braver Angels, but maybe I could do more. And I stepped up to do this little book project thinking it would take 6 months or something, but we finally, with a lot of help from Beth and also Becky Robinson and others, we finally, we were published on September 9th, which happened to be, by the way, the day before the Charlie Kirk killing. So we think it's kind of timely in the sense that where we are, where are we going, and people are losing, people seem to have a lack of hope sometimes. I feel a lot of despair, but we think there's practical steps we can do to make our lives better.
Wonderful. I also wanted to say, as people were coming in, several of you are very active in the protests in Woodstock, and I just raise your hand if you're willing to acknowledge that you're here. That's great. I just want to say I'm so grateful, and I'd be happy to come and meet with you guys sometime or stand with you. And one of the things we'll talk a little bit more about later this evening is the intersection between bridge building and activism, because many of us believe that they can come together. So we'll get to that, but I wanted to acknowledge you all for coming out tonight. Do you want to do your reading?
Sure, this is from the book, chapter 3. Maybe we could each be a little kinder in our daily interaction with others. But what about when it comes to people whose ideas or political views we find deeply offensive? Derek Black, the godson of former KKK Grand Wizard David Duke and son of Don Black, founder of Stormfront Online Community, was a student at New College of Florida. After his white nationalist views became known on campus, a group of Jewish students invited Black to attend their weekly Shabbat dinners. Derek accepted the invitations and he came back regularly. Eventually, at age 22, Derek wrote an article renouncing white nationalism, which was published by the Southern Poverty Law Center in 2013. Why the change in Derek Black? Clearly, it resulted from the relationships he had developed with the Jewish students who welcomed them to eat and socialize with them week after week. They could have denounced Derek, called him nasty names. Instead, they treated him with dignity and respect and invited him into their lives. This must have been anything but easy, but look at the amazing result. These students modeled the way to bridge difficult divides. We can't talk about improving political discord and reducing contempt across the political divide without some discussion of reversing the decline in everyday kindness. We can assume that the driver who gave Doug's wife the finger in the previous chapter didn't know how Doug's wife voted in the previous election. Of course, assumptions are always possible based on the kind of car or the state of the license plate, but our guess is that politics had nothing to do with it. But we know when we talk about politics and differences in personal beliefs, the conversations get a lot tougher. This is where kindness and empathy need to come in, with a commitment to really listening and being curious about those who have views different from our own.
Thank you, Doug. I wanted to sum up the mission of our book and give you guys a little bit of background on it. And I think that a good place to go with this is to say that when we first started writing the book, or when I joined you, we had a very different goal. Our goal was to see if we could save the country, right? And it's a lofty goal, and we still have that goal. Over time, though, what we found is that there's a real hunger for people to build relationships in their divided times and to mend challenging relationships. So I was exhibiting at a book festival in Nashville. I lived in Nashville for 21 years before moving up here a year ago, and a little bit over a year ago.
I couldn't get her to move in New Hampshire.
But I love it up here. I love this civic engagement of the sense of community. And I was fortunate enough to be at this book festival, and there was a No Kings rally going on right near us. And many of the people who were in the rally came by the book festival, and before, during, or after the festival. And I'll never forget, there was a pair of women, and one of them was saying to the other woman, well, let's just keep moving along. And this woman just looked at the book and picked it up and scanned it and said, I need to figure out how to get along with my sister. We've been estranged. I feel like I've been exiled from our family, and because we voted differently in the last election, and I haven't seen my grandkids, and just all of this was going on. And the other woman was like, no, we need to keep moving. And she said, I need to buy this book. She bought the book, and the joy that I felt wasn't necessarily from her buying the book. I was glad she bought the book. But it was from just realizing that we could make a difference, right, for people in terms of their broken relationships and try to mend that. So that's, to me, one of the big missions of the book. And I also sum it up by saying that we can disagree with each other. That's what America is all about, disagreeing. But we don't have to demonize each other. We don't have to decide that someone is, I like the way you say it, Doug, they're not ignorant, stupid, deplorable, not a patriot, just because we feel differently about issues. Do you want to build on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the more we got into the book, we want to give people some hope. I think that's really important. But we think that this is the most important challenge facing our country. I mean, we have a lot of challenges right now. We have national debt I'm very concerned about. We have government dysfunction. We have climate change. We have a lot of economic issues, inflation, whatnot. But we don't think, if we can't find a way to talk to each other and find a way to engage with people at different point of views, we don't think any of those problems will get solved. So we consider this the most important challenge. And we think of it as a hopeful roadmap for trying to make sense of this dark moment. And the goal is to transform the politics of fear into the politics of hope. And we look at the book at various different levels. Like Beth mentioned, we started off, come join us, we need to save the country. But we started thinking about it in a lot of other deeper ways. One thing is about relationships. We see people, and we're coming into the holiday times when you see stress about this. By the way, there was a great show on 1A today talking about holiday food on that program, and I wrote to him after. I said, "That's great. Let's talk about the good food, but how about we talk about how people can have conversations?" And we know people are stressed about these conversations, and it's how did politics become more important than family? I mean, now we have reasons, we lay out a number of reasons in our book why we think that happened, and we could talk a little bit about that. But to step back and think about this, Americans, there's studies now that if people have grown children, they don't want them to have, a large number of people are worried that they would marry someone from the different political parties. That was never true 30 years ago. I mean, this is just a sign of this disconnect that we're feeling. So we looked at relationships. We look at mental health. I mean, just giving people a little hope to have something to talk about where they can feel better about themselves. And we lay out some ideas. And then we got into how do you work in a community to solve problems in your community. And there are ways that people can come together, and we have ideas that Braver Angels is developing, and we're in parallel with Braver Angels about how we can develop community civic community-led solutions. I'm sorry, I believe it or not, I had about 6 weeks ago I have a stroke, and every once in a while I drop the word.
He's doing it.
I mean, it was obviously a fairly mild stroke. I was just on this NPR show, The Middle. It was 2 weeks after the stroke. Beth was kind of coaching me through it. We were obviously a little more nervous than we are today. But sometimes I drop, I miss a word here and there.
I'm amazed.
Yeah, but we carry, we're so committed to this effort.
Yeah.
And also, maybe you want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned it already, ideas that we have about people being a protester, being an activist, being politically active. That's the American way. Protest, stand up for what you believe. But we think there's ways that it can be done in a way that engages people with the other side. The Valley News had about the No Kings rally this was in June, and it gave people advice about going to the No Kings rally, and it said, don't block the sidewalk and things like that. But it also said, don't engage with those with contrary opinions. Now, okay, we don't want to have fights on the street. I can understand that, maybe where they're coming from. But we think engaging with people with contrary opinions is essential at least in the long run.
Well, yeah. So let me say a few things, and thank you for those who came early and your gracious offer that I come and we chat, because that's really been a lot of what I've done in Brave Your Angels. Let me just tell you guys a little bit about Brave Your Angels, because they really inspired us in this book. They are, or we are, a nonprofit national organization. It's made up of a balance of conservatives and liberals, although now we're realizing we want to expand the tent to independents as well, because we really welcome anyone who really wants to embrace this. We're calling it courageous citizenship now, but its roots are in reaching out, reaching across the aisle, talking with people who we disagree with in a way that, as Doug says, promotes civility, promotes dignity and respect. So Doug is the regional leader for New England. It's a very nice position, fancy position for a volunteer, right? I moderate workshops and debates for Brave Your Angels, and the reason I do that, we teach skills. The reason I do that is because as a doctor, I've learned that saying, see one, do one, teach one, right? So by teaching the skills of how to have a civil conversation with someone, even if you disagree, I've gotten better at it myself. And that's when you mentioned the activism in the bridge building, I believe they truly are integrated. Now, not everybody who's an activist has to be a bridge builder, and not everyone who's a bridge builder has to be an activist. As long, people should do where their passion is and where their skills are. I personally like being both. And I just wanted to read this passage, which activism is defined by Merriam-Webster as a practice that emphasizes direct, vigorous action, especially in support of or opposition to one side of a controversial issue. It's speaking up about causes you believe in and taking action to make a difference. It's passion, it's fire, it's energy, it's transformation of our systems. But in writing this book, we've also focused even more on bridge building, emphasizing the importance of dialogue with people on the other side. Because for me, I feel that there are advantages to being both an activist and a bridge builder. If we engage with those who we disagree with, that can actually strengthen activism. So the way I look at it is, if I talk to somebody, let's say about climate change, right? I'm pretty pro the climate environment, but I really want to understand where they're coming from. Maybe they're worried about jobs, right? Maybe they're worried about the economy. Maybe they're worried about giving up meat, whatever it is. And I really understand where they're coming from, and I ask questions of curiosity, not why don't you believe climate change is real, but maybe more like, tell me how you came to be concerned about some of the climate change movement or whatever. And then I learn what they're really concerned about, and they're concerned about jobs. And I can say, well, have you seen all the job creation that's going on now with solar and wind and nuclear and whatever? And what are your thoughts on national security and maybe not being so dependent on countries in the Middle East for our energy supplies? And when I do that, I do it in a respectful way. I can sometimes be an effective activist, right? Because I can change minds and change views. And then I'm always try to be open to other people's views as well. So that's what I talk about in the book, is the idea that activism can really be amazing catalyst for transformation. Bridge building, though, can give you those skills that allow you to then have your activism heard, right? And you're making a difference for the people you're talking to. So we can talk more about that in the Q&A. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, this is not about kumbaya.
Right.
And it's not even about compromise. It's just about respecting people. Now, if you respect people with different opinions, you might actually get some compromise. And they might actually start to listen to you. But we're focused on relationships and how we treat each other and treating everyone with dignity and respect. Now, if you're a Christian, Jesus said, love your enemies. But love's kind of a tough standard. I mean, we admit. We think civility is too low a standard. So we settle for dignity and respect. How do we treat people with dignity and respect? If we can do all that, we're all for it. It's hard to love some of these personalities in politics right now. I'm the first to agree.
Can you let's walk them through our practical steps. And I love the way you described the first step, which is the values. Can you talk a little about the values?
Well, the work we're asked, we think people can step up with doing some work within your own heart as a starting point, and being with a little self-reflection. And we suggest identify your own values. And this is a great exercise for all of us, by the way. There's other authors, Brene Brown, other people who have advocated for, Brave says find your top two values. We think that's kind of tough. Maybe 5, 8, 6. But what's important to you, and how you see the world and how you see other people. And then we'd say, now think about the people on the other side of politics. Forget about the politicians. Just think about their supporters. And you already mentioned that some of the lists that some people come up with. It's pretty quick to come up with a list of uneducated or stupid or elitist or whatever you come up with. And then maybe sort of compare your list and say, am I living up to my values in terms of how I see other people? And that can be a starting point to enter into meaningful conversations, because it's very hard to have conversations when you're going into it kind of angry. We want people to go into it kind of curious with some humility. Humility, it seems like a lost, we don't emphasize it enough anymore. Humility, I mean, when you ever hear anybody use the word humility and curiosity and listening skills, we've lost, Stephen Covey's great book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. It's even a better book than ours. It's a wonderful book. He talks about listening to understand. We don't listen to understand most of the time. We listen to reply. And by the way, I make these mistakes all the time. So we're not putting ourselves on the pedestal. And in the book, we share some embarrassing moments. I mean, you can find a picture of me hanging upside down on the Old Man of the Mountain. I mean, we're not perfect. We're striving to be better. But this isn't easy, and it takes a lot of work. But we think that this process is what's necessary, a necessary first step to really engage. So in courageous conversations, when you get into these situations, you have let's say you're at work, or let's say Uncle Fred shows up at Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden Uncle Fred is kind of poking at you a little bit. I mean, as some people do. I mean, sometimes there's people we've described different. It's based on there's a wonderful workshop called Families in Politics. You could probably find it online at Braver Angels, or we talk about the ideas in our book.
Yeah, and I can expand on this in terms of what we teach in Braver Angels, because a lot of that technique of these one-on-one conversations found its way into the book. Learning to really listen, to really, as you say, listen for understanding rather than listen to react. Not be thinking as you're listening to somebody about what you're, the gotcha, what you're to respond to. And then really connecting and acknowledging, like showing somebody that you understood where they're coming from. You don't have to agree. Acknowledgement isn't necessarily agreeing, and that's a really important point, because a lot of times we feel like we have acknowledged somebody who has a view that's diametrically opposed to us, and maybe we don't even feel like that's an appropriate view. We don't have to worry that we're going to give way to it. You know what I mean? We're just literally making sure that the person feels heard. So that's a huge thing. It's active listening. You probably have all learned it or heard it before. It's just something we practice a lot. And then there's a very interesting technique called the pivot that we use. And it's simple, but it's very powerful. What it is after I've heard you tell me, for example, how you feel about, I don't know, immigration, let's say, then I say, thank you for sharing that. I've come to see things a little bit differently. Is it okay if I share where I'm coming from? And then the person gives you yes and the buy. And if they don't, and they're, stone-faced, you go back and you listen to them some more. But let's say they give you permission. So you go ahead and you start sharing what you think, but it's from you. It's I statements rather than this is the way it is. It's like, I used to feel that way about immigration. And then I felt like we needed to have closed borders. And then I met a family and, they had come to this country because they were really, they were here because they needed asylum. And, you tell your story, you tell your truth, and it's going to be received, or most of the time, it's going to be received quite well. And that's what we teach. We don't say don't speak your mind. Definitely speak your mind. This kind of is where the activism and cultural come together. It's just doing it in a way that you are respecting the other person and curious about them and making sure you're always checking in with them to see where they're coming from. So that's kind of that second level. And we talk about, how do you prepare yourself for that? For me, it may be meditation, it may be running before I go to the Thanksgiving dinner with Uncle Fred. I'll go for a run for two reasons. One is because I want to eat all this great dessert food. And two, because for me, when I run or I do something physical, I get that tension out, right? And I'm in a better spot. So that's kind of the first level, the values. The second level is the one-on-one conversations. And then the third level, as you alluded to, is doing something in your community. Working with others, regardless of whether they're on your team or not, right? Your political team or not. So it could be singing in a chorus. I have a lot of stories in the book about that. It could be building a house together. It could be doing something to help support your community, right? Because when you do that and you see what you're accomplishing with your neighbors, even if they're voted differently than you, you realize that they're humans, right? They're not monsters. They're human beings, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, maybe I could step back a little bit, and when these conversations happen, and what are the alternatives? Well, one thing is people start fighting with each other, disagreeing with each other. And usually everybody feels that that's a lose-lose situation. You just walk out of it kind of miserable. Nobody's changed their mind. A second possibility is flight. Is like, I'm getting out of there. And, you know, again, not very satisfying. Another possibility is avoidance, which is just standing there listening to somebody say something you find irritating and having your blood go up, but you don't say anything. And the third step is these courageous conversations. Now, there is an easier way too, though, a simpler way if you could try with Uncle Fred. You know, you can just say, you know, and when these things come up, you know, there's elephants in the room, or I call elephants or donkeys in the room, where people know that there's this energy around politics and nobody wants to touch it, right? You know, with these situations. But you could say, you know, Uncle Fred, I'm happy to see you. You know, I know we disagree about politics, but my relationship to you is important. And I want you to know that. And that could just kind of burst the bubbles a little bit, you know, that's fairly easy if you haven't developed these other kinds of skills. So that you can, and people will feel better about it because it puts it out, the elephant's in the room as opposed to being hidden in the room. So, you know, and these other steps, I mean, they take a lot of practice, and they're not easy, and you mess them up sometimes. And they take a lot of effort and time sometimes to engage. But yeah, important friendships and people that are important in your life. To learn these skills can really give you a lot of hope.
Yeah.
It give you control. You know, when these people get into these difficult situations.
So we tried to make the book not just about all the different things that have been going on in the world that led us to this time. We also thought it was really important to give you practical steps. And I'm very proud of what we've done with that. I think we should open it up to questions. I know we talked, Liza, about just leaving a few minutes at the end, but there's so many people here. There's so much energy. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that all right? Okay. Yeah.
So it's one thing to say, I don't agree with you on the best approach to Ukraine or whatever. Excuse me. But it's a whole different thing when the person you're talking to believes outlandish things. The election was stolen. They're eating the cats and the dogs. You know, there's a woman who came to our protest and she said she had 3 guns to protect herself. She lives in this area against illegal aliens breaking into her house. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, I think that the problem is not that we're not willing to listen to other people. It's just that we don't have a shared version of truth. And that is just, I don't see this, I don't see, you know, the only way I see this is that you write those people off and you look for the people in the middle. And there's a lot of movement in the middle. There's a lot of people who consider themselves Republicans, but they now understand economic inequality is the source of a lot of stuff. They want access to health care. People should have access to health care. They're seeing the way the immigrants are being treated in the street and the ethnic cleansing of brown people. You know, you can see in there, but what you can't get past is outlandish beliefs. Yeah, I'm sorry, you want me to?
I was going to suggest that you do a role play,
Well,
if you're willing.
But the election was stolen because 17 million illegal aliens voted.
can you tell me more about that? I want to understand how you came to.
There's presidential books about it. It's a fact. Everybody knows it. It's a fact. They studied the issue. They had hearings on it. It's a fact. The election was stolen. Oklahoma has now put it in their history books. They're not allowed to teach them anything else other than the election was stolen in Oklahoma. I mean, sorry, the presidential election. If you're an Oklahoma student, that's what you're taught, and you're not allowed to be taught anything else.
So, yeah, I don't know that I want to do the role play right now. Let me, I know, if I were in New Hampshire, I'd be doing a role play, right, Dad?
Well, I mean, these are conversations that come up, and I think the important thing is to just listen and acknowledge people, and you don't have to agree with them. And what I hear from a lot of people on the left is that I can't talk to those people. I mean, like I was, I just can't talk to those people. And it just pushes them away. I mean, it sort of sends a message that I won't talk to you, and therefore, you're validating my viewpoint, by not being willing to talk to me. And like you're not, a lot of these tough conversations, you're not going to change anybody's opinion, but you might make them walk away thinking, well, that was a nice person, and maybe.
I guess what I'm asking, though, is not how to change someone's opinion, is how do you get to a common view of truth? You know what I mean? Like, it's out there that people honestly believe the election was stolen. People absolutely believe.
Let me see if I can tackle that. So it's interesting. We had an initiative called the Truth and Trust Project, and we asked ourselves, what comes first, truth or trust? And some people said you have to have a common reality to be able to develop trust. But several of us, including me, thought we needed to do it the other way around. In other words, we needed to develop the trust first, and then we could develop the truth. And I'll give you an example. I did, from public health, I did a workshop with some people who were supportive of the COVID public health response, vaccines, masking, whatever, and some who we called questioners of the public health response. And I was fascinated when we got everybody in the same room together. We realized that we were dealing with totally different facts, right? We had totally different sources. I was reading Francis Collins and Tony Fauci, and at the time, the CDC. I know the CDC has gone through changes. My questioner friends were looking at ivermectin catalogs and various things like that. But when we dug down deep, we actually all agreed on very similar values, like we care about the health of our community. So what does that mean? For my team, it might mean no cases of COVID, we all get vaccinated, we all wear masks, whatever. For the other team, the questioner team, it might be we keep the schools open. We keep the jobs, we can go out to dinner, we can go walk in the park, whatever. So it was very interesting because I learned that even though we did have different sets of facts and sources, we did have similar values. And that story has really stuck with me. But getting back to yours, it's what I guess I've wrestled with this question a lot. What you bring up about the different sets of facts. And what I've found over time is that if I'm going to stand, first of all, I try with everyone. I've definitely heard it said, those folks are on the fringe, don't go there. I've heard it said from climate activists, like there's a wonderful woman named Kathy Hayhoe. She says, focus on the people in the middle, maybe the people who are just, this side of the middle, but the people who really think that climate change is a hoax, don't even bother with them. I guess I've learned, I don't know if it's just because I want to practice, but I've learned that I really never write anyone off, because here's the thing, like as Doug is saying, if you have a conversation with them and they feel that you listen to them, even though you don't agree, because you've gone and you've gotten your, you definitely want to get your point in there and your truth in there. When they get that tweet or that post or something else comes their way on social media, they may not share it right away. They might say, I talked to Beth, I don't agree with her on the election, I don't agree with her on whatever the issue is, but we had a nice conversation, and maybe I won't retweet that, or maybe I'll look up the source. Maybe, like Beth said to me, she said she looks at the news on the right and she looks at the news on the left and she looks at different sources. Maybe I'll just try that out. So I'm not saying it'll work with that person, but sometimes it's as simple as they don't necessarily repost what they normally would have from someone else. And we can talk about conflict entrepreneurs and how they're stirring it all up and trying to get us all at each other's throats. Sometimes it's just a tiny little thing that's different that turns into a big thing, turns into a ripple effect where they're now no longer necessarily retweeting or reposting falsehoods. Yeah.
I want to tie in with what you just said. I heard somebody say that if you can somehow back up and find something that you do believe that about like a person just said, they sense that emotionally and they will unfreeze a little bit. So for instance, the election was stolen gang.
Yeah.
Then the tiny little grain that you might believe in is that person wants things to be fair. And you could just believe, I believe that that person wants things to be fair. And they can sense that somehow. And the same thing with some people think that the way to make schools more safe is to add guns. Some people think the way to make schools more safe is to remove guns. Or what most crews believe in is safety. And
That's beautiful.
they're right with those people.
Yeah.
You don't talk about guns, you talk about the school crossing guard.
Right.
And then once they get to know you, and people tend
Yeah.
unfreeze. But and they send us is interesting. The word believe does not mean I have epistemological certainty. The word believe actually comes from the word love. It's the same Germanic source. And
Yeah.
so when you believe someone, they pick up on that. They pick up on, like, was your name Ken?
Done.
Doug. But Doug says they pick up on the respect.
Exactly. I like what you said. That's what we kind of acknowledge. So let's say that you are having a conversation with me about, the gun issue or the other issue. I would actually look for that kernel and I would say to you, what I'm hearing you say is that you care about the safety of our kids in school. And that, then you feel heard. And it begins that empathy. That's exactly it.
We find, we'd have bravery angels workshops where people have very different political views. Some of these workshops are, anybody can attend, but some of them are balanced, where we have to have equal numbers. And we find that people always walk out of there thinking, wow, we agree on a lot more than we think we agree. Now, why don't people agree? We could talk about the way social media is operating, so social media algorithms. So we talk about these conflict entrepreneurs, people are making money and power to divide us. But we know to get people in the room, people agree with about a lot more than they really think. But I think you were really eloquent the way you said to find that kernel of connection. And this is what tapes, this is why this was hard. I mean, this is, none of this is easy. But it's coming to a point of curiosity and humility and striving to find that little element of that connection. It's really the essence of what this is about.
I want to follow up too on something that Susie, right? Yeah, said. The other thing I think we have to be careful about with the conflict entrepreneurs that are kind of stirring things up, the social media algorithms, it could be foreign powers, is not everyone, and like sometimes you read the news and you think that everybody thinks the election was stolen or everybody on the other side thinks it was. And it's actually, most of us are in what's called the exhausted majority. And this, right, when you guys heard that term, that includes people on the left and on the right. And there are fringes on both sides, but they're not most of us.
They've got the most attention.
Right.
They dominate the news. So we're kind of appealing. We're appealing to everyone, as Beth said.
And as you say,
But
when it streams, when it screams.
When it screams, it streams. When it's gone, pay no mind. That's kind of how the news cycle works. And it's not just because they want to be negative. It's just because it's gotten so competitive. Now, how do you attract people to you as a news source? And people explain this like foreign governments with the social media. I mean, there was an example down in one state that Jonathan Rush wrote about that people got together and they kind of this across the street going at each other on a demonstration. It was organized by the Russians or it was a foreign government. There was no one there who organized it. It was all fed on the social media. As
2016 on Facebook, yeah.
So this is the kind of stuff that it's a tough world out there to operate in. Just like it's tough for us to get attention to our book because when we were told by a traditional publisher that people won't buy stuff like this, but then buy more, of course. There's lots of reasons.
Yeah, we actually decided to self-publish because we wanted to get our message out to the world quickly. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned tonight that I was honored to be asked to speak at the Woodstock this year. Does everybody know what Woodstock is? Yeah, on self-publishing. So I'll be sharing some of our wisdom. That's a whole other night and a whole.
Does somebody have another question?
Yeah, other questions?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of comments. I do stand in park a couple of times a day.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference in terms of the time that you're allowed with people that are passing by. So, we have trucks going by, I did just say trucks, cars, going by, give us the finger, We have people that stop and engage. Sometimes with, lots and lots of encouragement, sometimes with a lot of argument. It depends on the season. We have traffic that's backed up in the middle of the, foliage season and you can engage more. But I'm thinking more about really long-term relationships. And I do have a dear friend who was very supportive of my mother, loved my mother. I love my mother. And she was always there for. However, she was one of those people that believes the election was stolen. Now, I noticed she was in a little house that she was protective of. And there was a house going up next door, the developer. And there was a guy working there who was probably South American, maybe Mexican. On project, he brought his German Shepherd with him. His German Shepherd, at one point, her dog came over, got into his territory, and he attacked her dog. She had to take her dog to the vet. She ended up incurring a lot of expense, and she absolutely forgave that guy. She did not sue him. She did not ask the money. She's just that kind of person. So I thought to myself, well, would I have done that? I don't know. Would I have demanded that he pay my vet bills? Would I have reported him to the authorities? There is, she's a gift to me because she allowed me to see over a period of time, a long period of time, the humanity, and another person who completely disagrees. But I will leave it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. someone else. I mean, we couldn't say it better.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, I managed to mess up my mic. Is it working? You guys can still hear me? Okay. Is it someone over here? Okay, yeah.
I was going to follow up on the information ecosystem points you were making earlier. Polarization is profitable, right? Generally, it's good from partisan politics, it's good for ratings, it's good for social media engagement. And it's so easy to find information that makes you feel good. What's the strategy? Is there a strategy, and what's the antidote to that, to isolationism?
Yeah. So we talk about that in the book, and I'm very proud of this chapter because I mentioned on the science communicator. What we talk about is how do you burst your bubble and get out of those algorithms. So part of it is fooling the algorithms if you really want to. And so, for example, I joined a Tennessee Firearms Association Facebook page, right? So that it's just totally confusing, the algorithm, and I like that, right? I have fun with that. In terms of what I read and what I listen to, I actually have, if you go to, I have Sirius XM. Do you guys know what that is? So I've got like MSNBC, which I guess is now NBC Now. They just changed their name.
MS now.
MSNet. No, I think it's whatever. It's more now. Yeah, right. And then I also have Patriot, which is Breitbart News, next to it. And then I also have Coda's channel. So I like go back and forth whenever there's something going on in the news. And I try to listen to the differences and the similarities between like you were saying, what do they have in common? And then there's also things you can read online, like there's Tangle and All Sides. And in our book, we list other media outlets, and they say, this is what the right is thinking. This is what the left is thinking. This is our take. And what's fascinating is there are even stories that we don't get to see. In other words, to me, that's the most fascinating. If you're on the left, there are stories that you're not even seeing. Like, for example, if you're on the left, there might be a story about how President Trump did something really good for climate change, and you don't even get to see it. And same thing on the right, you know what I mean? And so go ahead, Doug.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the most important thing is for people to just be a little skeptical, stepping back. I mean, I think politics, I take a different approach. Yeah, I'm on Facebook because I want to see what my friends are up to. I ignore the political posts, anything political. I do put things sometimes about our book or Braver Angels, which occasionally I get nasty comments, even from family members, that this is terrible to speak to people on the other side. But I mean, I think we got to be a little more cynical, or it's not maybe the right word, about how we're being manipulated. And I think that's really the key, and to be a little more skeptical.
Being more aware that, there are forces out there that are making us feel like we're being, we're all at each other's throats, or, anyone who's a Republican has a gun, or...
Well, there was years, us versus them mentality that sort of puts people in boxes. And people, this is ironic because we have so many friends nowadays, but they still mostly think like us. People are pretty siloed in terms of how they engage with people who always think the same as they do. And it pushes people away. It makes us we fall into this trap of assumptions, of this us versus them mentality. And it's not, everyone doesn't think like that. Everyone in the us category doesn't think the same. Come on, we're all individuals, we're all different. And anyway, do we have time for another question?
Yeah. So I just wanted to add, that comes to me right now, that what happened most recently with the shutdown of the government and all of this, and SNAP being defunded or whatever you want to call it, people of different opinions came together to support. I think our community has been very, very impressive in donating food, The stores donated meals, and I think that has been a changing factor in how we think of each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It brings things back to the community.
Right. And for sure. And no matter what people thought of each other, now you showed humanity and respect, no matter what the political opinion was.
Yes, absolutely.
And see, part of the challenge, if you're familiar with Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone, he wrote a famous, I'm sure it's in this library because it's quite a well-known book, but he talked about how people are, it used to be in bowling leagues, now they bowl alone, but it's really about people are not in social organizations, Rotary clubs, churches, and people are engaging in various ways, or volunteering is a wonderful example. Putnam talks about historically looking at the country, going back to the Gilded Age, which was around the 1900, was a very dark period, but there was an upswing of what he called a we versus an I sort of mentality. And then he said 1960 is when it started to go down again. So, which totally makes sense in terms of what we're seeing. And so what's it going to take to create another upswing? But the social engagement, social capital, volunteering is just so important.
And I feel like we have that here. We could, in New England, probably one more question, and then we'll be ready. We can sign books and continue to chat. Please.
It's actually an observation. I've had a chance to get Parkways. They make 20 pages into the book. And for those who haven't gotten that far or looked at it, I'm so impressed with the formatting of the book. It's a very accessible book, and it is like a teaching guide. And it reminds me a little bit, even with the way you might use shading to block off an area, the way you alternate voices. It reminds me a little bit, I could have been titled Language Building for Dummies. But CCAST and format, I think really serves you very well. It is instructional. You are conveying actionable information. And I'm just curious to know how you came as 3 books ultimately to deciding on how you wanted to organize and present the information.
What a wonderful question, and what a wonderful endorsement. And I mean, I think we always wanted the book to be accessible. So, like, I was pushing the quotes. There's a lot of quotes at the beginning of the chapters. But one thing one of the early readers said, and we wanted the graphics, like we have the graphic of the conflict entrepreneur as a crocodile eating the American flag.
Ready to eat the American.
And but you work as a team, and believe me, it was a lot easier just to write it myself. But it's a lot better. It's a lot better to have your book edited and other people, and it was hard. I can think of sitting in Beth's kitchen one day when she was, why don't you change this, Jen? You kind of. But one of the things we did do was early on we asked people to take a look at it, and one of the best pieces of advice we got was to tell the stories. And not that we didn't have them, but I think we really accentuated the storytelling with the graphic and the layout, but thank you very much. I mean, that's really our goal, because you can write a book, and anybody can write I would say anybody you can write a book with good ideas, but how do you make it accessible and readable and attractive? And thank you for that comment.
And on that note, I just want to say thank you to Liza, thank you to Carrie from Yankee Bookshop, Liza the library. Thank you to all of you for coming out on a cold, dark night. Thank you to our videographer. Let's just have a round of applause for